All right.
How you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So we arrived at our peculiar location for
Our Muskoka Lodge. Here we are for our.
for the first of some number of recordings.
Yes, indeed.
The second, we made one on the way, but
That's right.
Yeah, we're jumping in live and hard. And what's the hook this time? This book was written by my grandmother. It's one of the most it's one of the most books. It's a book of all time.
Yeah.
It is about her, Russell Kennedy, or is Elizabeth Kennedy Marsh, my grandmother, Russell Kennedy, her brother. It's really about her brother and the different little stories and things, but that took place as he was getting his medal of something while he was an engineer in World War II. All very exciting. You should read the book if you can find a copy.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I read some of it today, so I recommend it.
Yeah, the real reason we've got it out is just because narrative obviously is really important. Narrative is important what we're talking about, which is social media, and how narratives are structured and how they've been structured in my life has been really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose talking about this idea of storytelling and how storytelling comes to be and interests people and engages people. So you read a little chapter of this. What did you think? What was your takeaway?
I mean, what's really cool is it takes these little, almost like diary entries from him, right? This soldier in World War II, and goes through the daily tasks of what that means. So, they get so far, they're waiting for reinforcements, but the reinforcements can't come, so they have to wait more, right? And then, they're interspersed with all of the, horrific stuff is just a lot of waiting around and a lot of time spent just that's the other side of army life, is you're just kind of sitting there for long periods of time with nothing to do, right? So and it does a really good job of blending the personal narratives with an actual description of what's going on, so you can follow along with the troops and with your relative, right, as they're kind of marching through. Marching up. The part I read is the Canadian forces approaching Holland right around.
They get stuck in a caravan or something.
Yeah, and then Operation Market Garden doesn't really work out too well, and so they're kind of stuck for a while and they can't link up. That's where I got to.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
It's kind of a crazy book. That set of stories, some of which I've read most of the book. I haven't read it all. It's pretty loaded. There's some fun stuff in there. But you're totally right. The overall, as an overall narrative, it does struggle a lot from the fact that the war for my great uncle was essentially. So he was an engineer. His job was basically to go and build bridges in advance of the troop lines, which is why he's technically on the front line, if not in front of it most of the time. Yeah. And so it was an incredibly high risk part of the operation, which means that his whole military story is alternating between large periods of him being really bored and doing nothing, and then very small, very fast periods where everybody around him dies. Right. There's a couple pieces of, whether it's in the book or just passed through family lore, but he's so many of the drivers that he's with die. He gets a reputation that people don't want to drive with him out of fear of death. Wow.
Jeez.
Just looting. It's total luck, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's wild though.
But the reason we're talking about it, the reason I'm bringing it up, is because for my family, this sort of information preservation and sharing is really important. Right. And it is really interesting, especially noticing the difference between my family and the family of the person I'm in a relationship with right now. They don't have that sort of level of writing tradition and level of preserving just things about us. Right. So my family has endless sort of family trees, and there's at least 4 different people have tried to figure out where we actually came from on the Irish Canadian side. Because, you left, when things were bad in Ireland, and our names are super generic Kennedy and Russell, Kennedy and Sweetie. So
there's a lot of Kennedys and a lot of Sweeneys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so for me, the part of these books, and this is Boats, Bridges, and Valor. This one's about Russ Kennedy. The one that's actually probably more influential for me, which I don't have a copy of, is called The River, and it's just about the Ottawa Valley River where that family grew up.
Wow.
And where I'm in some way from. So what's cool about both of these to me is it's this way in which families are preserving information about themselves,
right?
And sharing it. And that sort of ties me into exactly what we're doing right now and exactly what I've been working on pretty hard for the last few months, which is social media, and how social media has sort of replaced many of the same mechanisms that we use, or in some basic way seems to have replaced so many of the same mechanisms we use to do this sort of thing. But social media literacy and awareness and knowledge really isn't at the point where people are doing that on a regular basis. Using your social media to keep track of your life, using it in ways to sort of consciously publish things to people about what you're doing. This is something that like hits people on social media once they are, once they've gone viral or something, or once they've become a public persona, and then they're like, gosh, I should think about how I'm presenting myself on social media. And I think one of the big changes that I think is already occurring in our lifetime and is really important is this transition away from social media being treated as this place where, you get on it, you say whatever you want, you post your conspiracy theories on Twitter or whatever it is.
You get off.
You get off of it. You live your life as a normal, regular person who is like kind and normal, and then you get online and you're terrible to people.
Yeah.
And you get this hard flip-flop between digital life and personal life. Yeah. Which is seeming to break down, and people, especially for me, looking at the way children are using social media, they're transitioning out of this sort of there's no longer this like total hard divide. Right? There's this soft divide. There's this, there's parts of social media where we are sort of random and our own, and we're unaccountable. But then there's social media where, these are my friends, yes, but they're also the friends of my friends and the colleagues of my friends. So, we're reaching, like when we grew up, that we had direct friend social media, and then we had stuff that blew off into the internet, and not a whole lot in between.
No.
Whereas nowadays you have these bridging social medias, your Discords, just all these different ways to get into little groups so much more easily and so much more, but also incorporate people you already know so much better.
Yeah, and there's more channels, right? I think.
And better organized channels.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like in our days, you had like little channels that you could post.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the same. You could find random people on the internet there, but because like we both remember when relatively few of our classmates were using social media. You couldn't just rely on having everybody you knew up there.
No, you couldn't. And there'd be only, we didn't really have too many even group chats or anything like that.
No, I barely remember using group chat.
Yeah, I think maybe we had like a group chat with like 4 people for one night or something like that to figure out an event, like to go out.
Exactly.
It was different. Yeah.
You would blow up for a moment and then you go on.
Yeah, and it was also we were kind of Luddites by a lot of the standards today. We were using Facebook, so I don't think many kids are using Facebook these days.
No. The role of the image in the video has changed so radically. And obviously for us, even sharing images efficiently and quickly in those early days of the internet was shocking. It's like, wow, my image went fast from A to B. Oh, it's a big different
deal. Yeah, exactly. I think it's, so I've been hearing a lot, and this is from like online commentators, pundits, just people with an opinion that are online, as they're saying, and once again, I don't know how accurate this is, but it strikes a chord with me, is that, internet culture, there used to be this divide like you're talking about, where the internet culture was kind of edgy. It's where like the trolls went. It's where people went to like just kind of get shit off their chest, almost like the shadow to the regular society. But now kind of what these people are saying is that we as a non-internet culture derive our culture from the online sort of online culture. So in a sense, is that, you know, things become viral online and then they become talked about in mainstream news sources. You know, memes, for example, that start online, such as, you know, Kamala Harris getting called brat, right, by Charlie XCX, you know, which is a good thing, right? You know, suddenly my parents are talking about that 2 days later because, you know, this social media.
Charlie XCX?
She's
I know
you know, yeah, exactly. They don't even know who she is. They just know about these viral, so-called viral moments, right? And they're being reported on CNN and MSNBC. That's a bit of a flip too in our lifetimes. I don't think people were reporting on the Reddit message boards 20 years ago what was going on.
No.
You know?
And people, and that, once we look at social media as media, that level of scrutiny has pretty much never been shown by the media onto the media itself.
Right.
Really, because before it was pretty much only one media and it would have to look at itself.
Yeah.
Whereas now you really do. You have these clearly very separate sections of the media that are clearly somewhat in conflict.
Yeah.
Which is also just kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, the decline of Twitter itself has been remarkable to watch.
X.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's amazing how as a culture everybody can just kind of choose to decide that something is silly.
Right.
You know, like it's crazy. Like the number of brand shifts that we've gone through in our lifetime.
Yeah.
We couldn't remember or count most of them.
Right.
The ones that stand out, the only ones that stand out to me off the top of my head are when ISIS emerged. A whole bunch of brands. A whole bunch of brands had to change because ISIS is, of course, the famous Egyptian god.
A lot of things were named after ISIS.
So all of a sudden things had to shift.
That's right.
And I remember reading a funny article at one point that was just about like people who companies that had to change their names versus the ones that didn't, and what the rationale was.
Oh man,
crazy.
That's wild. But
you know, the idea that the public, this rich guy bought Twitter, which he can do, and then changed his name, and then everybody was just like, that's dumb, we're going to keep using the old name, kind of. That's weird. That's just so weird. That's a crazy moment to be a part of. But it just kind of happened and we rolled with it. And, you know, there's always some hope that some of that turns into awareness that perhaps more of these issues are silly and need some investigation. You know, that's a real transformation. Having this opportunity for media to look at another type of media, having a group, having people as a whole respond in these ways that are measured by social media, sort of reflected by media as a whole. Very interesting.
And it's interesting to kind of, I've been thinking a lot about it, and you know, in the lead up to our conversation, because I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, but the first question I wanted to get your sense of these kind of so-called teachers or, you know, educational media personalities. And I know that's a big one because I include anyone from Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate to Hassan and others in that category, right? These people who are, you know, in the case of Hassan streaming for, you know, X number of hours every day. You get to interact. They're just always on. You know, you're consuming the news at the same time as the individual is consuming the news, right? It seems that, you know, the way we kind of even consume information about the world, especially educational information, it's been shaped and contoured by social media in really striking ways, such as, you know, I really see it in guys like Hassan, for example, that it's become like a bit of a show every day. People get online and they're not looking necessarily for the information. They're looking because Hassan is going to say something really funny today, or he's going to go after those guys or that.
They're looking for the information, but through his lens. This sort of thing. So I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and I think there's upsides and downsides, but I think one of the things that ends up being really toxic about social media is when it gets sucked into sort of an instancy bubble, when it all turns into just like constantly, there's got to be reward. There's got to be something there that's interacting with the world. And, social media gets really addictive and really problematic when you see something happening in one part of your life and you're like, oh, I really want to know what this person says about that, or that, that's when we're reaching sort of dangerous territory.
Right.
You should be having your own interesting thoughts and feelings about this. And then other people come in afterwards.
Yeah.
But that moment where what is interesting to you is suddenly a particular individual's perspective rather than the information that's being gathered. That's, to me, that's a sign that relationship, as in a very one-sided way, has become perhaps too serious.
And
this is the sort of thing that we don't monitor, that we can't monitor. But that relationship with people on a screen is a really important one, and I've been on both sides of it. Mostly on the side where you're watching. And you get this real feeling of comfort and of engagement, of connection with these individuals. And that can be quite dangerous. That can really, that can warp and distort sort of your own priorities as you try to figure out what other people will think as opposed to what you're.
I agree with you, and if I'm going off on too far of a limb, let me know. But I see it's shaping kind of culture around it too. I look at the Logan Paul Mike Tyson fight as a sort of example of a social media star having such an impact that they're able to kind of pull a boxer out of retirement ostensibly to and I know it's a bit of a drop in the bucket, but it's a weirdly specific moment in time that something like this can occur, where you can have celebrities who are celebrities who have gained their popularity, notoriety from the traditional route, and they're rubbing shoulders with celebrities who've 5 years ago were nobody, and then they've managed to become people through social media online. And these two kind of elites, we talked about elites in the last part, and how difficult that term can be, but these two kind of categories of the elite, or of people who are successful in
people
society,
who are elite in their own fields,
are kind of rubbing
probably
shoulders.
Not members of the political elite.
No, not yet. Hopefully not yet. But just kind of where industries are willing to accommodate social media stars in interesting ways.
That's a good example, and it's a crazy moment because the Paul brothers really they managed to warp the whole field of boxing, the whole sport. And on a basic level, it was easier said than done because boxing wasn't popular. Yada yada, and it had been very popular, so there's clearly an audience, blah blah blah. And white collar boxing has always been a bit of a thing, so there's a precedent there. But it radically warped things, and, to the point where you brought the guy who people still think is probably the greatest technical boxer of all time, as far as I'm aware. That's crazy. And the horrifying bit to that, of course, for me on a more general level, is that we're dealing with a world where social media is pushing this sort of thing, and we're dealing with a lot of people who genuinely don't seem to understand, how badly Mike Tyson was going to lose that fight, right? And that's a little sad, and Mike's a fantastic boxer, but he's ancient, and you don't need a particularly well-trained 25-year-old to beat up a 65-year-old man. You just don't. I'm sorry. But the fact that the so much of the world that was interested in that fight was interested in it regardless of the fact that if you knew anything about boxing, you knew what was going to happen. That's harkening back to other things we've been talking about today, that's the sort of thing I find a little scary, where you have that level of sort of mass ignorance, I suppose. Just very blatant disconnect from the world that they seem to be engaging with.
Yeah, and I think if you're open to it, I'd love to kind of bring it back around maybe to you, and kind of maybe this is a good segue into sort of what you're doing specifically around social media as part of and some of the projects you're working on, because you're really trying to engage with this stuff ethically and from like a perspective that's oriented towards teaching people the truth.
Thank you.
About reality.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very big on the teaching thing and about trying to be grounded and figure out how the world works. All that's really important. To be honest, the social media project is hitting a number of different sweet spots. Mm-hmm. But in terms of observers, the most important thing for me is just practicing this sort of new art of storytelling. And for me, what's scary about the like Mike Tyson, the Paul brother, all this stuff, it's just the randomness. Yeah. This savage, pointless randomness of, what am I doing today? I'm selling an energy drink to make lots of money for no apparent reason. Yeah. Do I need more money? Somebody told me to sell an energy drink. It works. I became popular. What am I doing today? Beating up a 65-year-old man. Yeah. It's the lack of like structure, overt plan or path or just anything in so many of these lives, especially of these ones of these kids who exploded on social media and became ultra wealthy and have no idea what to do with it. Whether it be your Logan Pauls or your KSIs or your other dudes who did the same thing.
Kai Kanat.
Your Kai. Is it Kai Kanat or is it Kai Sanat? I'm not really.
Oh man, we're showing our age here. We're all you youngins watching this gotta help us out with that. But no, I get you, and it seems to be driven by just like spontaneity, and it honestly it's.
And there's no narrative here beyond the day-to-day narrative of what are they gonna do next. Yeah. And at a certain point, for me,
it's like ADHD. Like it's like a cultural almost ADHD. It's like social. It's someone with undiagnosed ADHD.
And my hope of that is that that is a very basic narrative. And there's lots of room to grow from there. So I don't have a problem with any of those people doing their thing or resisting. I do find it a little concerning that they're so large, because it implies that many people in this world of ours get to that sort of content and then they just kind of stop. They don't make the next jump into what is interesting about this is if you're watching Mr. Beast, a classic example, a guy who makes dumb amounts of money, has no idea what to do with it. He gives you this impression of like wanting to do nice things for people. No idea how to do them. It seems to involve a lot of giving people cars and somehow dealing with the taxes afterwards. But this and people want the like appearance of doing good things, which means I think people want the good result. But that to me, there's like they're close, right? The tools are there. There's people who are capable and who are in the right position, but they're just confused and lost and don't understand what to do with this feeling that they have to make things better, and with all of this money that they're receiving from this platform that they don't understand. And for me, with my social media, one of the things I'm trying to do is just show that like you can play social media games in ways that aren't totally degrading. Right. You can get on there and you can post content on a regular basis, and you can make stuff that does interesting things and that tries to get you picked up by the algorithm or whatever it is, but that isn't just constantly trend chasing or like trying to sacrifice your whole identity every couple of weeks in order to figure out what the new sort of it thing is supposed to be. You can just get on there. The narrative can just be you, but with a little bit of control. You plus a bit of a guiding hand. And that's what I do. I'm not. I like posting on the gram. I post some pretty fun stuff, I think. A lot of it's just for me to look back at later and be like, I did that.
No, it's true.
But it's also, I'm specifically posting with just narratives in mind, but just narratives of my life, It's like, what am I reading right now? What am I working out? If I am, how am I doing it? The idea is if I'm leaving this trail of images and stuff, I want to leave things that paint a picture of me that I like, and that's it's that sort of basic approach that I'm finding interesting, and also just, the more I do it, the less it seems like anybody else is doing it.
No, and it's interesting, and I think it's really good to kind of have to check in to see how it goes, because in many ways you're just getting off the ground with some of the social media, and it's not been very long, and it's looking great so far, but I definitely want to pick it up further down the road. But we probably have time for a couple more minutes. But I guess kind of to bring it back to sort of where we are now, I've got a really good sense of like this overall sense of your thoughts on social media, and as well as your own kind of personal take on it. But I wanted to bring it back to kind of where you think what young people kind of just sort of entering into social media, some of the young kids you're dealing with at your school, teaching them, like how are they kind of experiencing this world, and what are some steps or just ways they can interact with it that might be a bit more healthy?
So what I always find inspiring about watching children in general interacting with media, social media, and new tech products in general, is just this sort of speed and willingness to challenge themselves, to figure things out in new ways, to make mistakes. It's something I struggle with hugely at this point, now that I'm old. I try to use an iPhone. I've been using the iOS since the third one or something. A long time. And so when it doesn't work when I do what's supposed to make it work, I do it again, and it doesn't work, makes me angry, I do it again. Kids, they run into that scenario, it seems like a ton of the time. They do it wrong the first time, they just try something different. And it's a reflex to interact novelly and newly and do interesting things with their products. So that's the good stuff for students, for children. That's the thing that they kill, that they do a really great job of. They find new things, they're fascinated by it. It's really cool to watch. The struggle, the thing that I see children messing up across the board, is what is interesting. What is it that is actually interesting? And it's in the lens, it's where they're pointing their cameras, it's what they're taking pictures of, what they're talking about. And there's and I think it's part of the same positive. There's a problem for children where they can't see what's interesting in themselves and what they're doing until somebody actually pulls them aside and tells them they're doing a great job at it, essentially. And I try to do that as much as I can to as many students as I can. You can't get them all, you can't get them for all things. And just in general, using social media, jumping on trends, whatever it is you're doing, that's all fine. But taking your phone out and pointing your camera at the world for a bit and just being amazed at the stuff that's out there and at the things that are in front of you, and just putting that into social media, into a box, all of those moments that you preserve like that mean very little while you're in the same moment and in the same place. But 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 2 years from now, radical differences, radical changes. And it's seeing that specialness in each individual moment, taking a moment as a student, as a child, and be like, okay, this is cool. I have tiny hands, and they're going to get bigger for the rest of my life until they stop getting bigger, and then they shrink a little. All of these different little pieces, pictures that I take now of myself with other people, and of my body, and of my siblings, and of everything else. All of these things will change in the next couple of weeks. That sort of realization for exactly how current and changing and sort of an integral.
How ephemeral it all can be, right?
And exactly by the same thing. At any moment, something good hopefully happens, but something bad could happen that changes the whole picture. And if you didn't snap it, then you don't got it.
No, it's true.
And when you get to our age, there's just a value in having recordings and images.
No, there is.
Because 30 years is a lot of memory to try and sort through.
It's a lot of memory. There's a lot of content, and your memory does play tricks on you, right? So it's nice if you have a photo to say, no, this is really what happened, or yes, she was here, or whatever it is, right?
Exactly.
That's great.
Any final words, buddy? Thank you so much.
I don't think so. I think that was good.
Cheers for talking to me on this.
Cheers.
And, it's been a fun one. We'll catch you next time.
We'll catch you on the next one.